everyone, welcome back to the 21 and Sensory podcast with me, Emily. Today's show, our special guest is Lauren Melissa Ellzey, also known as Autienelle. Lauren Melissa is an autistic self-advocate and author of 3 young adult novels, Boy at the Window, STREAMLINE and GIMMICKS and GLAMOUR, which explore belonging for queer neurodivergent youth of colour. Her advocacy work has crossed paths with New York University, Reframing Autism, Cripple Media, NeuroClastic, and the United Nations. She holds a Master of Science in Library and Information Science and resides in New York City with her cat Tifa and her dog Farron. So, Lauren Melissa, would you like to say hello?
Thanks for having me today. I'm really excited to chat.
Thank you for coming on, and we've managed to work out the time difference, so that's good as well.
Right.
Because you're in New York City and I'm in the UK, so I think it's kind of lunchtime there and it's evening here.
Just had lunch.
I still don't get the concept of time difference, but I think that's just a maths thing in me.
Just remember that you live in my future.
Now that's confusing. How cool is that though? Like wild. Could be a whole podcast in itself, but thank you so much for being up for coming on my podcast. I have followed you for a few years now online, and it's been amazing to see your growth. But we will definitely get onto that. I think first of all we could maybe just discuss a little bit about you, the diagnoses that you have, and are comfortable talking about, just so people get to know you a bit, and then we'll chat about your books and all things social media.
Well, like you said, I'm Lauren Melissa, and I am from the United States. I have been diagnosed with autism. I was diagnosed several years ago. Even though I was diagnosed in my early 20s, I do not really consider myself to be like very late diagnosed because, as you know, different studies and statistics have shown, most people who are assigned female at birth aren't diagnosed until after the age of 18. And I feel like I was diagnosed fairly close to that. So, as an autistic person, I guess it's a little late, but as an AFAB person, it was kind of right on time. And so that's the diagnosis that really takes front and center in my life. I've also been diagnosed with anxiety, but through the years, it's kind of become more and more clear that I have distinct anxiety, as in distinct to autism. So even my anxiety, I feel, is a part of my autism diagnosis, or at least my personal manifestation of that.
Mm-hmm.
Other than that, I have hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos, which is a common co-occurring condition with autism. I have very flexible joints, which sounds fun as a party trick, but in reality leads to a lot of chronic pain. I also experience sensory processing differences very, very, very regularly in my life. But yeah, I enjoy writing, reading. I have very active special interests in my life and have had them since I was little. And overall, that's me in a very, very small nutshell.
No, that was great. Thank you. It's really interesting to hear you say that, you're kind of not late diagnosed, but you kind of are, like that kind of threshold of 18 and, whether or not it's kind of late. And I feel like late diagnosis is so different for each person, sort of thing. So it's interesting to hear you kind of describe it as not as late as it could have been, kind of thing.
Right. I think in the context of education, it was definitely late because I had already graduated with my bachelor's by the time I received my diagnosis. So I didn't receive any in-school accommodations for autism. However, by the time I graduated, I was actually kind of receiving accommodations because I was receiving accommodations for, like, even in elementary school, I had like under the table received accommodations for stimming. When I was in high school, I was receiving accommodations for migraine. And
Mhm.
when I was in undergrad, I was receiving accommodations for chronic pain, which was very closely related to my sensory processing differences. So it is interesting because I wasn't receiving autism accommodations, but I had so many symptoms that were
Mhm.
noticeable to others. I say symptoms instead of traits because they were very surface level. And so I was actually receiving some support for those things.
Okay, that's interesting, isn't it? Because there's so much of an overlap, like you were saying, with kind of anxiety and sensory processing issues, even the hypermobility as well. Like they're all quite kind of comorbid, aren't they? And it's quite difficult to sort of separate each. And a bit like you said, like they all relate to you being autistic, which is quite a good way of looking at it, I guess, as like autism is the main kind of overarching theme. um, kind of were able to access accommodations, but not through kind of the main diagnosis because you didn't know that you were autistic. But the fact that you were getting it for other things, I guess, is a good thing.
Too. I actually suspected that I was autistic, that I am autistic, starting when I was in the eighth grade. So around when I was 13 years old, I actually was like looking up literature online because I was very tech savvy.
Hmm.
I was looking up literature online around autism and doing like the screeners for myself at that time. But back then, autism and girls, as we know, is just so underrepresented and misunderstood that even though I felt like the descriptions of autism described me, none of the screeners, like the pre screeners, would pick me up. They would say borderline.
Hmm.
And it wasn't until much later when more literature came out around autism in girls that I was able to even reach out to a psychologist about it.
Okay, that's so interesting. Like, was that kind of, it sounded like it was like your own research, like your own sort of doing. What kind of led you to thinking that you might be autistic? Like, did someone ever mention it to you, or was it something that you came to on your own research?
I always felt so different from everyone around me. So by the time I was 13, I knew something was like, in my mind, I was like, something's off. That's kind of how I perceived it.
Hmm.
But I didn't know what. So I was constantly seeking answers. But interestingly, after I received my autism diagnosis, I talked to my mom about it. Well, I actually talked to her during the process because she was involved in the process of my diagnosis. But afterward, when I finally received the official diagnosis, she said to me that she had actually suspected that I was autistic starting in early childhood. So she had actually thought about it. But back then, there was so little mainstream understanding that she
Hmm.
assumed autism was co occurring always with intellectual disability. So, since
Hmm.
I wasn't highlighted as having an intellectual disability when I went to school, she determined that I couldn't be autistic. But once I received the diagnosis and she understood that those things were different, although sometimes co occurring, she was like, yeah, I always knew.
It's so interesting how like family members like almost come round to it. They're like, well, now that you know tell me more about it, it does sound like you. um, but that's nice that your mum was, I guess, A, supportive, and B, we could kind of understand it better now because you're right, like it just wasn't understood, let alone to do with women and girls. Like it's yeah, I was told that like autism didn't like exist for girls when I was young, and that's why I didn't get diagnosed. And it's
Mm.
frustrating to hear that because it clearly did exist. um, but yeah, the terminology and you're right, like what people thought it related to in terms of disability. Yeah, it is frustrating. I was going to ask you as well if you'd had any kind of previous like misdiagnoses that you'd like to highlight at all, because I know a lot of autistic people kind of go through a few different sort of misdiagnoses before they get to the autism diagnosis.
Yeah, so I was misdiagnosed with depression at one point. I definitely, like I mentioned earlier, have anxiety, but I don't really have depression. But I
Mhm.
think that like flat effect, and me just saying literally like things about life, like life is like this, and people like assumed that I was like depressed about it, but I was actually just really, really, really anxious.
Hmm.
um, and then I was misdiagnosed with fibromyalgia, instead of sensory processing differences, and like sensory overload and hypermobile Ehlers-Danlos.
Hmm. Okay. That's, yeah, it's mad, isn't it? That it's hard to advocate for yourself and be like, I don't think that diagnosis quite fits. And the fact, like you're saying about depression, like, of course, like you don't know you're autistic and the world is overwhelming. Like, of course, you're probably going to come over as maybe depressed, but until
Mhm.
someone gets to the root of that, they might just label it as depression. Um, but yeah, it's sad to hear how many people go through misdiagnosis to get to diagnosis.
Yes. And well, the other thing that I was, I guess, labeled as isn't like a misdiagnosis, but I think it definitely, you know, kind of prevented others from understanding my experience was, like I hear a lot of autistic people saying, they were diagnosed as gifted or like labeled as gifted
Mm.
in school. So I was, I guess that phrase twice exceptional, which is such an interesting phrase. Um, but yeah, so I think that led to some misunderstandings of my experience. Like I mentioned with my mom saying, oh, she can't be autistic because she doesn't have intellectual disability. In fact, she's got this like gifted and talented label.
Hmm.
But even the gifted and talented program that I was in elementary school, I actually in the fifth grade opted to drop out of it because I was under so much stress with the sensory and social overload of my life that I actually said I didn't want to be in gifted and talented anymore because I needed more time to like recharge. Which looking back, oh my gosh, like a fifth grader going up to their gifted and talented teacher and telling them that is like really intense.
I love that though. I love that you were like advocating for yourself and you're like, this isn't right for me. Like I don't need to be. Also, you don't need to be in that group to be, gifted and talented in many different ways. But I think that's great that you went up and you were like, no, this is too stressful. That's amazing. It's like, because we're talking about and your studies and stuff, it'd be, yeah, interesting to hear a bit more about how, I guess, your love of writing, like from an early age, and I guess through school and stuff, where you're given sort of opportunities to do with writing.
It's fascinating because a lot of people assume that my special interest is writing,
Mhm.
which to me, like, is just so not the case. I don't have a special interest in writing. In fact, I perceive writing as a conduit through which I can express my special interests.
Mhm.
And it's always been that way for me. So I didn't learn how to read until kindergarten. I like rejected reading, but then I learned how to read really, really, really fast once I did. And I started writing really fast, like in the first grade. And I started writing stories very quickly because I was just always fascinated with different fantasy worlds and elements of fantasy and fairy tale. So I was always wanting to write fairy tales and express those things and always talking about them too. But, around the time I was maybe halfway through elementary school, I started noticing, that I was getting nicknames like loudmouth, too talkative, blabbermouth, things like that, because I would just talk and talk and talk and talk and talk about my interests.
Mhm.
At that time, my main interest was The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time.
Amazing.
And I was completely obsessed. And like, I can play that whole game forwards and backwards and upside down from heart, like from memory, which is actually quite impressive considering like the majority of the game is like puzzles and mazes,
Mhm.
if you really think about it. But so I realized, oh, well, I can actually like write I think like it was probably fan fiction, but I was changing everybody's names. I was like, I can write like whole books about Legend of Zelda: Ocarina of Time, and everyone will be like, "Wow, look at her! She's such a good writer. She's so imaginative." And I get praised for being like a blabbermouth or a loudmouth about my special interests, so long as I type it out or
Mhm.
handwrite it out. So that was kind of a way I think that I chose to cope. And honestly, of all of the unconscious coping mechanisms that I created for myself, I have to say that was probably one of the healthiest ones. So
Mhm.
I, to this day, I still write about my special interests in one way or another. Of course, still changing the names.
Yeah.
But my first novel, actually, that I ever wrote, like full length novel, was when I was, I think, 14 and 15 years old. So in the ninth grade. And the entire thing was based off of a music video that was connected to my special interest in visual K rock music. Just
Okay.
one single music video, and I made an entire novel for it. So, yeah, that's really what the writing process is like for me.
How many words are we talking? How, like,
I don't actually know the exact word number because I hand wrote that novel. But I did do this, like, I remember doing this wild thing where I would count every word on every page and in the upper right hand corner, write the number of words on the page. And by the end of the book, I did add all of that up to
Mhm.
see if it was long enough to be considered a novel. So I do believe it
Oh,
was like a very short novel.
still, it's a novel at like the age of 14, 15 is impressive.
Okay, but okay, total aside, I reread it when I was a senior in high school with my sister. We were reading it out loud and we were laughing so hard because I mean, I was like a young person writing it. We were laughing so hard at the writing that our neighbor came over and complained that we were being too loud.
Oh my god, it's like it's come full circle from being told that you were being like too loud in school to like your neighbor and the fact that you were reading the novel. That's so funny.
You're right, it really has.
Yeah, that's hilarious. Also, it's always so cringy to like read back like previous stuff, isn't it? You're like, what was my head going through? Oh,
Yeah, a
that's
little
cute.
me.
So, when did you sort of decide, do you know what, I'm going to do a degree in creative writing? Like, was that after you kind of graduated? Was that kind of your sort of main plan?
So when I went to undergrad, I was actually trying to decide whether or not I wanted to major in English literature or math, because I
Okay.
also really, really love math. At least at the time, I loved it. Because the way I said it all the time was English class allows me to like express myself, but math class always has an answer. And so I felt like they were the best sides, like the best two sides to the world for me.
Hmm.
And then I learned from the school, like I learned from my college's writing director that I could self-design a major in creative writing. And so since writing was actually like my biggest favorite thing to do, I decided to go with the self-design major path and major in creative writing.
Okay, that's quite cool that you can actually kind of design your own pathway. A 3 year course, is that right? And then you did a master's on top of that?
Undergrad is 4 years typically in the US.
Oh, okay.
And then, yes, I got a master's on top of that, but that was in library and information science.
So, what made you want to kind of specialize sort of further and do that master's?
So, actually, after I finished my bachelor's, I had to take a break from school. I was so burnt out. And to be honest, I didn't think I would graduate at certain points, but I also didn't feel like I had an option not to graduate due to my family's circumstances.
Mhm.
But once I graduated with my bachelor's, I was like, I can never go back because undergrad was so socially and sensory taxing for me. And it really, really took a number on my health and my mental health. So I took a long break and I was working though full time. But
Oh,
then
wow.
I realized that what I was working in was not what I wanted to be. And I was reading a lot of literature around like autism and women. And I came across these vignettes of stories about different autistic women and their careers that they were in.
Mhm.
And I remember reading all the stories and thinking to myself, wow, they found a way to be in a career that even if it wasn't like their special interest, they felt so passionate about and they felt so comfortable in. And at first I was kind of resentful, like being completely honest. And then I was like,
Mhm.
there's no reason why I can't shape that for myself. I just have to stop saying maybe sometime in the future and try for it now instead. And libraries for me were always a safe space. As a
Mhm.
reader, as a writer, as a techie, I loved the library. And when I was really little, like I'm talking kindergarten, I actually lived right down the street from my public library. So I would go to the library almost every day that I could. I was always in my school library. It was sensory safe. My interests were always accessible, be it via book or via online. And the librarians were generally very, very kind to me. So when I was thinking, who do I really want to be? I thought, well, I'd really like to be a librarian. I'd like
Mhm.
to create that safe space for other neurodivergent kids. And so that's why I went to library school and got a master's in library and information science.
Oh, cool. And it's so interesting you talking about library because I feel like it's such a like safe space for so many neurodivergent people. Like I love my local library and like gravitated towards my library at school as well. And it sounds like you were the same. It's where you can find out about all your special interests, like what's not to like, and it's usually relatively quiet. Like
Yeah,
what
exactly.
more? And if you get a librarian on your side, they'll look out for books for you. Like that's great. What more could you want?
Hmm.
Um, so what did you end up doing any kind of work in libraries at all?
Actually, I am a librarian and I do my
Oh,
advocacy work and my authorship on the side.
oh, okay. That's so interesting. Librarian, that's so exciting.
Yes.
So do you come across a lot of neurodivergent kids where it's like their safe space too?
Yes.
Oh.
I meet a lot of neurodivergent teens and individuals, and I do my best to just make a safe space and not be overbearing, and just let
Mhm.
them grow and flourish, but know that they have a place where they can belong.
Oh, that's so lovely. So do you do that kind of part-time alongside everything else that you do, or is that like a full-time job and you're juggling everything?
It's a full time job.
Whoa. Wow. So you work full time and you're an author. I mean, makes sense. You work in a library, you're an author. I can see the kind of two things there, but also the amount of like advocacy work you do and kind of, working with companies and, casually places like the United Nations. Like, wow, that's a lot to juggle. How do you do that? Big question.
I think that there have been times in my life where I was like, go, 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 and so excited and like very, very active in all realms of my life. But
Mhm,
I think as I've grown into it more and more, definitely seeking balance has been a huge part of my career because and knowing like what to prioritize and how to set boundaries.
mhm,
So I think that that's one of the reasons why I've kind of shifted a little bit away from Instagram and more into Twitch
mhm,
because Twitch is like a long form activity where I can engage with autistic community and build a safe space, and I don't have to be online posting like every day in the same way as other social media platforms are.
mhm. And I can also imagine that that long form content, people get to know you better than, the 30-second, 1 minute video where they think they know you, on Instagram, when actually, for example, if people do watch your Twitch live streams, they might learn more about you being a librarian. So like I think you can
Yes.
get more into it, can't you? You can be more yourself.
Yes, and in my personal experience of autism, I find the short form 30-second thing to be absolutely terrifying because I already feel like I'm so likely to say something in the like quote unquote incorrect or different way and like have it be misperceived. So like the idea of like having like 15 seconds to express an idea and like hope everybody understands is like completely unfathomable to me. So I definitely love long form content these days.
Also, it's nice that you can, like, I've seen that your streams are kind of, you know, like body doubling or like kind of like chats about your special interests and things. And I just think it's nice that you can do it on a subject that people will kind of come to you to enjoy, if that makes sense. So, you know, it's not, you're not putting out content for, you know, specific people. You're like doing it because it interests you. And I think that's what's so lovely about like the streaming side of things. Like people tune in because they want to hear more about you and your interests, rather than, you know, quick social media kind of trendy videos.
Right. I think I can express myself more clearly, talk about my interests, but also we have time where we talk about autism related topics specifically too, because I think it's so valuable, especially when, you know, big topics crop up on social media, then all you can do is read the comments about or comment about. It's nice to be able to hold like 20-minute forums where we can just dive into it and talk about the nuance around things.
And I feel like, especially things like the autistic Barbie, like everyone had something to say about that. So it's nice that you can kind of have like you say, a bit of a forum of like, what do people think? Like, because it's kind of hard to know what to think when you read everything online. It's like, oh, so many different opinions. But that's
You
nice that you've
know,
got like a little safe space to talk to people in.
definitely. And, you know, speaking of autistic Barbie, I actually was a Barbie doll collector when I was young. And, you know, they say
Oh.
like autistic people will like line up their toys.
Mhm.
I would set up my dolls to be scenes from my special interests. And then
Oh,
I would just stare at them and be
amazing.
like, what do I do? And luckily, I have a big sister. And I would be like, hey, come help me. Let's play. And, you know, at some points she was like, I don't want to play Barbies anymore. I'm like so over this. And I would just be like, but I don't know what to do.
Oh.
So that was actually a huge part of my life, I guess, before, or maybe at the same time a little bit as writing, I would express my special interests through Barbie dolls. So the idea of an autistic Barbie is kind of funny to me because I never actually thought of my Barbies really as what their roles were, because I always turned them into something completely different related to my interests. But at the same time, I'm like, well, how nice. Like, that's interesting. I wonder what
Mm.
I would have thought being got, like if someone had bought me autistic Barbie.
It is interesting, isn't it? Yeah. Like, and the fact that you say, you know, they were just, you know, different ways of expressing yourself and your special interests. To see like the different kind of Barbies that are coming out, I think is hopefully a good thing. Podcast episode in itself, just autistic Barbies. Yeah, but sorry, right, getting back to you. We could talk about Barbie for a while. So yes, you're kind of, you know, writing alongside having a full-time job. Did you have a full-time job when you were writing your first novel? Because that it was 2022 when Boy at the Window came out, I think.
Yeah, so my first published novel was written when I did have a full time job, and we were currently experiencing a shutdown due to a pandemic.
Mhm.
So I had a lot of time to spend with just me and my writing. So I actually decided to write Boy at the Window because I recognized that I was experiencing a lot of screen time during the
Mhm.
shutdown. I was on my phone a lot, I was on my computer a lot, nonstop, and I experience a lot of migraines and sensory processing issues with too much screen time. Although I just feel like I do it to myself anyway. But I was like, okay, it's reaching a new extreme. I'm going to handwrite a novel. So that's what I did, where
Whoa.
I had to write a chapter every day, handwritten, and
Wow.
I would read it to a friend every single day who was like always like, "Oh my gosh, I'm so bored. Where's the novel update?" So I would read it out loud every day, and after about a month and a week, I had written the first draft of Boy at the Window.
Wow. Also, I love that you had that like live ongoing audience like that wanted to know the next bit sort of thing. Like that must be quite kind of motivational as well to write each day to provide the update.
Definitely, yeah.
Wow. And to handwrite it as well. That is yeah, really something. But I guess like you sound like you took the opportunity of the kind of shutdowns and during the pandemic, because I feel like a lot of people you almost became paralyzed by just like doom scrolling online because it was hard because you couldn't go out anywhere or do anything. Um, but yeah, so how did you kind of from that first draft sort of kind of get to the publishing of the book? Like, did you approach sort of publishers? Like, because I know you've published your books through, I think it's Bold Strokes, is that right? Bold
Yeah,
Strokes
Bold
Books.
Strokes books.
Yeah. So how did you kind of come into contact with them?
So after I wrote Boy at the Window, I had absolutely zero like drive to get it published. It was
Okay.
just a fun thing that I wanted to do,
Oh,
and
okay.
my friends were telling me that I needed to get it published. And I was like, no, guys, it's fine. And they were like, no, actually, we'll be really upset with you if you don't even try. So I told everyone that I would look into a small press or an independent publisher that I felt like might actually be a true good fit for Boy at the Window, and that
Mhm.
I would send it in to one press just to get them all like off my back. So after a lot of research, I found Bold Strokes Books, and I sent them the manuscript in, and I was told I would hear back in like a couple months, and a couple of weeks later they replied and said, "We want it." So I was really excited
Wow.
actually.
That's so cool. Also, your friends for pushing you. Excellent.
Yes.
That's really nice. Like, and also the fact that you were the one to kind of find them and reach out to them. I think that's quite nice because you wanted to work with them initially and then they chose your book. So that sounds like the perfect kind of match. And they specialize, don't they, in kind of a range of different sort of like themes of books and also like representing like LGBTQ plus authors.
Yes, so they focus entirely on LGBTQ plus stories by
Mhm.
LGBTQ plus authors.
That's great. I'll definitely put a link in the show notes to their website because, yeah, they've got lots of different authors and like so many different kind of genres of books. But can you kind of explain a little bit um, the kind of plot of Boy at the Window and kind of the themes? And then we'll talk about your other two books as well.
Boy at the Window is about a high school boy who has been diagnosed with depersonalization derealization disorder and
Mhm.
maladaptive daydreaming. And the book opens up with him returning home from a mental health hospital after a very traumatizing mental health crisis moment in his life. So he's trying to return, to life outside the hospital, but nothing in his life has actually changed. Like nobody really wants to believe that he had this crisis.
Mhm.
So he's kind of just thrust into a new school, and he spends all of his time coping by daydreaming about Neverland. And at the same time, he's also a very, very talented cross country runner. So he winds up being noticed for his running right away at his new school, joins the cross-country team where he feels like he can fly like Peter Pan, and he
Okay.
meets another boy on the team, G1, who might be the one to join him in Neverland or to break him out.
Ooh, cliffhanger there. I like that. Oh, that's such a lovely story. And the whole kind of like Neverland bit as well, like coming in. Is that another like special interest of yours? Kind of the more like fantasy sort of side of things?
Yes, I am very entranced by fairy worlds, and Neverland to me is a fairy world in and of itself. That's the way my brain has kind of processed it. I mean, there is
Mhm.
Tinkerbell there, right?
Well, exactly.
um, but so in all of my stories, I try to embed a fantasy element, but in more of a low fantasy way, not high fantasy. So for Boy at the Window, it's the maladaptive daydreaming and the inclusion of Neverland into Daniel's life. And in my
Mhm.
other novels, it comes up in different ways. Not Neverland, but the Fae.
Yeah, I was going to say that because the Gimmicks and Glamour, that was your next book. That had like a kind of fairy war, didn't it? Like,
Yes, Gimmicks and Glamour was my fun little project where I decided I wanted to write kind of like a Gossip Girl style young adult fiction novel,
mhm,
but make it about a girl who sees fairies and is kind of like basically autism coded.
mhm,
And yeah, and instead of everybody being like she's the most popular girl, she's going to be like the most hated girl in school. So that was my exploration of that idea, and I absolutely had such a blast writing it. But I think of all three of my stories, Gimmicks and Glamour, despite its fun, um, catchy kind of tone, it honestly, I think, explores some really darker themes, the most deeply, of
mhm.
isolation and, um, just lack of acceptance in
Mhm.
society towards autistic people.
And would you say that's kind of it's your lived experience that is kind of behind these stories? Like how do you get the ideas for writing the stories? Is it kind of a mix of lived experience and, your interest in all things fantasy and like fairy and things? Like how do you come up with these ideas?
So usually something about one of my special interests sparks the idea, and I start
Mhm,
to daydream about it constantly. I definitely have had my own experiences with maladaptive daydreaming, although it's such an interesting phrase, maladaptive, because in a way, I didn't have anything else that I could do to support myself during very difficult social and sensory traumatic times of my life. So I think
mhm,
it was just kind of adaptive daydreaming. But I would spend like maybe 3 to 10 hours a day in a daydream, depending on the day. So, in general, my interest can kind of give me the content through which to express my reality in a daydream.
mhm,
So, almost all of my novels came from daydreams in that way. But of course, writers to some extent ought to write what they know. So there is definitely a blend of lived experience as well as the narratives that people in my life have shared with me. So close friends, nothing in a way that would reveal who they are, but
mhm,
I think especially when writing neurodivergent characters, it's very important not to only write from my lived experience because I can't represent all neurodivergent and autistic people.
mhm. Yeah, I think that's important, isn't it? That, you know, it's important to write from your own lived experience, but actually representation more more widely um, is really important. And the fact that you're like, I can't speak for every autistic person. Like, this is just, from me, kind of thing. And I was going to mention your last novel, Streamline, and that sounded like it had a lot of different representation. I was reading the reviews for it, and people were saying like how well represented like lesbian and trans characters were, and how you managed to talk about like online trolling and like the different themes of just friendships and relationships, and also autistic women and girls. So it sounds like across your books you've managed to really kind of draw from your own experiences, but also highlight things that, you know, do go under the radar a lot.
I really enjoy bringing to light through fiction the big topics that people are often uncomfortable with talking about. So I think Streamline, which I refer to as my spectrum book, because it's about this, autism spectrum, the gender spectrum, the sexuality spectrum. It's just like all these spectrums
Yeah.
coming together in this book, which is all centered around the main character, Loon, who is my first openly autistic protagonist in my 3 novels. She's the only one who's like, "Hi, I'm autistic. I know I'm autistic." And she's a gamer, and she's also a streamer for her game that she's absolutely entranced with. And she's also in love with the number one streamer of the game, who nobody has ever seen or heard. So she's basically just in love with a really beautiful elf avatar. So she's queer, she's a lesbian, and she winds up engaging online with this love of her life and getting to know Noct. And all the while, as she's trying to, figure out more things about her identity, realizing who Noct truly is as a person, and trying to gain like understanding of the offline world around her, they don't really accept her for who she is. She feels like as a gamer, as an autistic person, and she's also biracial as well. She feels very much like she lives in this dual world. Offline, not accepted. Online, accepted. And she's desperately trying to make a way for herself that's authentic to herself. But yeah, I definitely in that book really wanted to talk about some pretty dense subjects that I feel like young adults now are so open and ready to talk about. But I feel like folks in my generation are maybe a little bit more anxious to talk about, because I think that when it comes to gender identity and sexual identity, sometimes we're a little bit more bracketed. And so it is kind of ironic that Loon, who's very much a black and white thinker and Streamline, is like my fluidity queen for talking about these spectrum topics.
Exactly. I definitely feel like there's more kind of like networks and groups and like communities, which is so like lovely and inclusive. And I definitely think that just the fact that we're seeing more representation across like all media formats, whether it's books, like television, films, like I feel like we're getting there with, you know, just showing a range of different people from different walks of life. Leads on quite well to like your advocacy work. So obviously I know that you have quite a big social media presence. Like your Instagram is very popular, and I know that you stream over on Twitch, that you're doing all this kind of online advocacy work, and also doing like in-person things like conferences and workshops and podcasts like this one. How do you find, you know, is it something you really enjoy, and how do you make time to be an advocate as well as all of these other things?
Definitely enjoy doing advocacy work. And there was a short time in my life when I actually was doing advocacy work full time in like a full time position, as like a instructional support specialist for an autism inclusion program. So I did realize through that experience that while I absolutely love doing advocacy work, making it my full time job was very, very difficult for me, just because it created a lot of cognitive dissonance.
Right.
And by that I mean, there's what I know to be, more supportive or more authentic ways of engaging around autism inclusion, and then the slow shift in that direction can be very jarring, especially when I see it impacting people in real time. decide to move back to working in advocacy part-time for that reason. But, I'm still working with the same organizations that I worked with when I was working full-time. So it's not like they were doing anything wrong. They're doing some really amazing work. And I think that that's very important for me in terms of like maintaining my own mental health and also just being honest to who I am as an autistic person and my personal manifestation of that. My special interest is not autism. Some autistic people, their special interest is autism. So, like, that's all they want to do all day. But if I actually do that all day, then I lose sight of the things that actually bring me autistic joy, right? So, the fairy world's visual K. So I have to have a balance with it, even though I absolutely love autism advocacy. And so I guess like one way I've been able to manage that is by focusing my advocacy work around the things that I'm either experiencing in real time or the autism topics that I'm most passionate about. So one of those things is special interests. I love just special interests in general. Like I love that topic. I love explaining special interests. I love talking about how special interests can be a balm, but also can create some difficulty when the special interest goes up against societal expectations. Um, the connections between like special interest, monotropism, and rumination, and like how can we support one another? How can you really be supportive of an autistic person in your life? How can we embed special interests into education? Oh, love that one of my favorite topics. So yeah, bringing up the topics that really mean something to me. Stemming is also like a huge topic that I absolutely adore talking about, not just like stimming and autistic bliss, which is great. I mean, my number one stem is not stem dancing. Everybody thinks my number one stem is stem dancing because I posted those stem dancing videos. But my number one stem is actually like audio stemming, so listening to the same song on repeat. So like people don't realize like really behind those stem dancing videos is like me having listened to that song like 5,000 times. But I love talking about that. But I also do actually feel like it's really important, and I feel very equipped to talk about self-injurious stimming because that has been something that I experienced especially a lot growing up without adequate support and having people tell me to stop stimming but then tell me but then not actually provide support for why I was stimming. So then I wound up doing a lot of self-injurious stems because the more healthy stems were pushed away and not allowed. So yeah, I think that when it comes to finding balance in advocacy, talking about what I want to talk about or what I'm passionate about is really important because I'm not doing this work alone. It's not like I am responsible for talking about every single autistic topic in the world. Otherwise, autism advocacy is going to spontaneously combust. No, like, thank God I am not the only person doing this work. It's so many people globally. So I guess if someone is interested in advocacy work, I always try to tell them, like, it sounds, trite perhaps, but like be true to you. Like I spend so much time, unfortunately, masking my autism. Why am I going to talk about things that I don't want to talk about in my self-directed advocacy work? It's just not worth it.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel like you've touched on so many different like topics there, like kind of mental health and sensory issues and like coping skills as well. And the fact that there are healthy and unhealthy coping skills and stems, I think, is really, important to kind of highlight, but also the kind of sensory overload and like social overload. Like I've seen your post, for example, around like being highly susceptible to like visual and like audio sensory overload, and the kind of symptoms that come with that. Like it's like managing that sort of stuff like every day. Like how would you describe kind of your own sort of coping mechanisms?
My own coping mechanisms. Well, one of them is to make sure that okay, it's almost like a radar kind of thing. And that is if I need to check in with myself sometimes and be like, have you spent time with your special interests recently? If not, you've been masking a lot and you have not been prioritizing yourself. So that's a good barometer for me.
Mhm.
But in general, there's like a difference between like my sensory joys and my sensory coping skills.
Mhm.
And so, like, let's say I'm in a situation where I need additional sensory accommodation or support for myself, definitely noise canceling headphones, noise reducing earplugs. I do carry specific fidgets. I also really like fidgets that have a smell element to them because I am very, very sensitive to smell.
Mhm.
And so being able to reset that for me, like by breathing in some essential oil, really helps. I do carry face masks as well to whenever I'm in a situation where the smell is too overwhelming, I can put a mask on.
Mhm.
Um, I have to take sensory breaks and like step away. That's really important, way more important than I often admit to myself
Mhm.
because I think growing up in K through 12 public education without really like very many sensory accommodations, one thing that I kind of told myself was life is pain and you're going to have to just sit through and be in pain to do the things that you want to do. And
Mhm.
I don't think that's true, but that's a lot that I've had to unlearn to be like, no, actually, like, take a break, step
Yeah.
away, and that's okay to do. So when it comes to social overload, I have a different set of coping strategies that I utilize. But in the end, though, I think to like reteach myself that I don't have to do a lot of things. Like, I'm actually very happy in my safe spaces and, with my online life and reading and engaging with a few friends. Like, I'm very,
Mhm.
very happy with that. And just because the world is trying to send me a different message doesn't mean that that's what success looks like for me as an autistic person. I
Mhm.
get to define what my personal definition of success is, and I get to live and breathe that.
Mhm. That's really that's a really good way of putting it. And also like I feel like that kind of relates to like being able to say no and advocating for yourself. Like I'm such a people pleaser. I don't know if you are the same, but it's just like built into me to have to say yes to things and dread doing them, but at least I said yes when actually if I thought about it properly and a bit like you said, like did a self check in and be like, is this really something that I want to do? Is it gonna, give me joy? That sort of thing. It's really not. But it's like standing up for yourself is so hard.
And while I don't refer to myself as a people pleaser, I think that that is how I think that that is like I do fit that definition. And I think a big thing that has personally been helping me recently around that tendency of mine is kind of like unpacking what it is that's really going on underneath the people pleasing for me,
Mm.
which is that I coped through social confusion, kind of trying to gauge all social interactions on whether or not the other person left feeling positive. And that then was like the feedback I needed to know whether or not I had committed any social mistakes. If the other person could leave the situation feeling good, the other person that I'm talking to,
Mm.
then I was a success in that conversation, which I guess like is people pleasing, but not in the same way that I think people often like define people pleasing. It was literally down to like, how do I know if I did a good job in this conversation? The other
Mm.
person is happy. Good
Mhm.
job. I did it. And so I've been trying to like teach myself that how I feel when I leave the conversation is just as important, perhaps.
Mm.
And that's been a mind blowing realization for me in the last couple of years. But I don't think a lot of autistic kids are taught that. I think we're
No.
often taught how to make other people feel more comfortable. And in all of that teaching, we lose touch with how we feel at the end of a conversation and the importance of that.
Yeah.
Thing is like, how did the other person feel? How are they feeling in this conversation? Did I make them feel good? And so that is my job. That's not my job, but I've been taught that that's my job because I'm the one making the social mistakes.
Right.
And so
Okay.
I've been kind of unlearning that. I don't know if I'm very good at explaining it, but that's what I've been
No.
working on.
Well, the thing is, like, we're talking about this as well, and some people might, they don't have this like built in, this whole like, they don't realize the amount of like processing our brains are going
Right.
through in social interactions. Like, we're doing some hard, like, like equations, and
Yes.
other people are just living life.
Right.
Yeah. I was going to ask you as well, because you were talking about like your favorite fidgets and things like that. Do you have like a top 3 favorite fidgets? Because I feel like you can tell a lot by someone's favorite fidget.
So these are fidgets, not just STEM tools, because my favorite STEM tool is my headphones. But fidgets wise, I like these one fidgets. They're like multi-sensory and like they can open and close. They're like egg shaped and they open and close. And on the inside is a stone that you can apply essential oil to. And then when you close it, you can't really smell that anymore. And then on the top of the stone, there is like a metal like set of small metal balls that you can run your finger on. So I really like this fidget. It also comes with a wristlet because I can do so many things with it. I get like the open close satisfaction plus the sound with that. I get the smell and I get the cool metal balls and getting to move those around. So that's definitely my favorite fidget. I used to really, really love jewelry. Um, but they were actually like kind of starting to hurt my jaw a lot. And so I do chew gum a lot too, but I've mostly phased those out for hot drinks and fizzy drinks because that also gives me like the, I guess, oral stimulation that I'm looking for. When I was younger, my number one stim was to like suck my fingers, and I actually didn't stop until the 6th grade, so about the time that I was like 11. And because of, I think that has always been my go-to, like that kind of like need for stimming. So I think that's why like the jewelry, the gum chewing, the fizzy drinks, and the hot drinks have been such a big part of my life. At one time, I had a tongue ring, and that was awesome, but that was also really messing up my teeth. So I did have
Really?
to take the tongue ring out. Yeah.
Oh. Isn't that interesting? Because like I feel like a lot of people would be quite kind of sensory, like averse to that sort of thing. But then I can understand why they might like seek that out, kind of thing, as a
Okay,
like
you're
distraction in your
so right.
mouth.
Oh, well, no, but you're so right because like I actually hate the idea of metal on my teeth, and like metal
Yeah.
clinging together is one of my worst sensory experiences. Like I cannot take it. And metal on teeth, like people don't even realize it. They like eat salads with their forks and they scrape their fork on their
Oh.
teeth, and I just like want to scream. But for some reason, the tongue ring did not. I think because I could choose. Like I knew exactly where the tongue ring was. I wasn't like scraping it really against my teeth in that way. But there was, I will be real with you, there was a time or two where I accidentally bit the metal tongue ring. And
Ouch.
I thought that, well, not even just ouch, but like sensory wise, like it was the scraping. It was like exactly that
Ooh.
sound. And I was like, I don't know how long I can do this. Like, I don't know how long I can keep this tongue ring going.
I like that you were like, how much more can I put up with this? Excellent. That's so interesting, and also like I was kind of obviously reading up about you as a podcast guest, and you saying that like fizzy drinks like give you that kind of like sensory sort of joy, which I think is so
Mm,
like interesting, and I feel like a lot of foods are a bit like that. Like for me, I find stuff that's like really crunchy and gives me like that feedback is really like satisfying sensory wise. And yeah, I feel like it's interesting to talk about food in a way other than like flavor and taste, basically. Like the fact that it can
Mm,
actually give you that feedback that sometimes you
right.
just like crave.
Yeah, so I feel like a lot of people think about food and the like sensory, right, as the sense of taste. And like, I think
Mm,
what we often forget about is one, the sense of touch, right? So with textures, I think a lot of autistic people have actually like more sensory averse things with food when it comes to the sense of touch and the texture of a food. But even beyond that, what it is for me, it's actually more of the proprioceptive sense and
mhm,
the pressure on my gums and on my teeth that makes a huge difference for me when it comes to like food or a STEM toy that is more like an oral STEM toy. It's that pressure. And what they've actually found is like if you use like an oral stem, that could just be like chewing a pin or
mm,
anything like that. It actually drastically increases a person's frustration tolerance. So it is a huge coping skill, like a very supportive coping strategy for those who are big oral stimmers, who want something crunchy, who want
mhm,
something chewy that they can chew on for a really long time, or anything like that, to cope with like maybe non-accommodating environment to use that oral stem.
mhm. It's interesting, isn't it, that it can affect things like that. Like I also feel like um, it can like help with concentration, like chewing something, like because it's almost kind of grounding in a way. We kind of touched a little bit on kind of stimming and what people think is your favorite stim versus what it actually is. um, and I know that you post a lot of kind of the dancing and like spinning and things like that. Um, but I also think it's really interesting you saying about your headphones. I read one of your posts on being like asked to remove your headphones and like how you have to explain that they're a sensory aid. Is that something that you come up against quite often? And do people kind of misunderstand the kind of use of them?
I've definitely had experiences where I've been scolded
Hmm.
for having headphones on or earbuds in. Like I've had people like be like, "You're not being safe right now. You need to take those off." And I
Okay.
find it like a huge assumption to make
Hmm.
about a person, because for me in a lot of those situations, to not have my headphones on or not have my earbuds in would actually make the environment even less safe for me, because I
Hmm.
wouldn't necessarily suddenly be able to attune into the environment. I would probably be less attuned because of overstimulation due to audio input.
Hmm.
um, but, something very, I'm sure, frustrating for many educators and professors around the world is that your hair can kind of hide your earbuds. So, like, I'm not lying when I tell you that in undergrad, there was like a whole semester where I like never took off my Bluetooth earbuds, basically
Hmm.
ever, which I'm sure did some kind of damage to my ear canal. But it was like the only way that I knew how to cope, not just with sensory, but I was going through a lot socially at that time. I was really, really having a hard mental health time. And so playing the same song on repeat kept me grounded. It kept me going. Like it was my complete and total lifeline, just nonstop the same song. And that was the whole reason why I could attend class. And I was participating in class too, but I was just always listening to the same song and no one knew that I was doing that. But
Okay.
if I didn't have that, I don't know how I would have made it through specifically this one semester.
Hmm.
So yeah, that same song, I think that's what a lot of us call it, same song, is very important to me. It's
Hmm.
been a grounding influence through all of time for me, definitely.
And interesting as well that like it didn't stop you from participating or being part of what was kind of going on around you. And I also feel like it's the same for like for me. I wear kind of noise cancelling like in ear like AirPods um without playing anything on them, just for the like noise cancelling. Like you never know what someone is listening to or if they're not listening to something. But a lot of headphones, you can hear through, like you can hear what's going on around you. So I kind of think people jump to the conclusion that you're like blasting music really loudly and can't, you're not safe in your environment. That actually people might not be listening to anything, or like you've said, you might be listening to a song on repeat just to get through like being in a certain environment. Like there's so many different ways that things like headphones can be helpful, and I feel like there's not a great understanding of that. Yeah, I feel like that's a whole podcast in itself again. um, but like just the misunderstanding of like sensory aids and things. But yeah, that is frustrating.
I think it's also one of those things where there are people who do keep their headphones on all the time as an accessory, or they are using them to like just ignore things or like not pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And it's one of those moments where it's like, wow, this sensory tool is actually very common, which allows those who need it to almost like blend in when using it. But then because it has, this tool in particular is very normalized in society, it gets misread. And that just requires so much education and like balance and like understanding. I don't have the answers for navigating all of those conversations, but I do want to like name that it is real that some of these tools are being used for completely different reasons by completely different people of completely different neurotypes. And autism can still be a non-apparent disability at times. And how do we then navigate that murky realm of accommodation?
Yeah, it's fascinating, but also, yeah, how do you go about that? Yeah, I was also going to ask you as well about, we've kind of mentioned on and off your special interests, and I feel like we need to give you the opportunity to info dump about those. But I was also going to ask you just before that, do you plan to kind of write any more books? And if you do, what sort of kind of representation do you think that you'll kind of include in them?
So I do have a work in progress that I'm taking a lot of time with, simply because I also want to work on honing my writing. I want to kind of like level up my writing a little bit. And so I've actually been focusing a little bit more on poetry and a little bit more on short story in my personal life, and holding this work in progress kind of in my drawer and seeing what will come of it, if it will come to be. I also have I've been going through like a transition period in my personal life right now. So I've been wanting to honor my mental health and find like my own path in terms of boundaries and work-life balance. So that's been something that I've been focusing on too. But this work in progress haunts me on the regular. And I think about it all the time. And it's actually a little bit more high fantasy than my other books, although it's still grounded in, my commonplace setting, Southern California. I'm actually from Southern California. I live in New York City now, but I'm from SoCal. And it's there, and it's about, young adults, fairies, and it's definitely very dark, and its themes revolve around grief and popularity, and definitely, of course, got all the queer kids, got all the neurodivergent kids showing up. I can't. All that too, yeah.
Okay. We'll be keeping an eye out. Keeping an eye out. Where can people buy your books? Through the Bold Strokes website? Is that like the best place to go?
I don't really have like a strong opinion about the best place to go for books.
Mm-hmm.
Probably because my passion, not passion place. I was my passion place, but I guess like my deepest desire is for people just to like read.
Yeah.
um, but yes, you can purchase my books directly through the publisher site, Bold Strokes Books. They're also available on like Amazon, Barnes Noble.
Oh,
You can
cool.
probably get
Okay.
them through Bookshop.
Mhm.
Basically any online retailer, you're most likely able to find
Mhm.
the books.
Okay, cool. Amazing. I will definitely put that in the show notes. And then, yeah, your special interests. Do you want to kind of, I know we've been talking for a while, but I feel like we've kind of mentioned special interests quite a few times, and I haven't outright asked you, what are your special interests?
So I guess like fairy worlds a little bit. I say that, but like I feel like this is a very autistic thing to say, but I love fairy worlds, but I love the fairy worlds I love.
Hmm.
And so it's not like every fairy world. And that's fairy spelled Faerie. It's a little
Hmm.
different than Fary.
Hmm.
But darker fairy worlds, elves are included in that. So Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time was definitely like the root of that. And it has expanded. Of course, I've read Lord of the Rings, but it also has like led to me loving certain kinds of like atmospheric electronic music that sounds
Ooh.
like fairies in the woods. Like it's very like expansive, but also extremely narrow. So I definitely love that. And then there's a kind of music from Japan that's called Visual Kei, Kei, and it's largely a rock music subtype that within it has multiple genres. It is a whole culture in and of itself. I have been absolutely fascinated with and in love with Visual Kei since middle school. So both of these interests are very long term and ongoing for me, and I absolutely love everything that they've brought to me in my life.
Hmm. And how did you come across the visual K side of things? Was that just like the internet kind of thing, or was it kind of like recommended music? Like I always find it fascinating, like where special interests start.
So I'm going to try to keep this brief. Um, so Fairy Worlds was actually how I got there in a very strange way, but
Mm.
I also have always been very into rock music. I liked rock music since I was like in the third grade.
Hmm.
And so I was really into fairy worlds. That also kind of led to me being into Sailor Moon. And Sailor Moon wound up with me, plus Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time, being into like a lot of Japanese RPG games.
Right.
So I got super into Kingdom Hearts, which is like Disney, and it had Peter Pan in it, and like, say like it had like all these different like fantasy elements that I was just super into. So I got into Kingdom Hearts. The
Hmm.
intro song to Kingdom Hearts is by the artist Utada Hikaru, and I got into her music. She's very ethereal in some of her stuff, and I was on a forum for Utada Hikaru, and there was a sub forum called J Rock, and in that sub forum, I found Visual K, and the rest is history.
Internet hole, we love it. You fell in and you just kept going.
Yes.
That's so cool though. I love that. That's why I kind of love the whole like internet culture and like sub forums. Like when people just info dump and it's excellent. Um,
Yeah, and I think that there obviously, like special interests used to be called restricted interests and things like that. And I think there's this perception of like perhaps, oh wow, internet hole. She just got like stuck there and she never came out. But I've connected with so many people online and offline
mhm,
because of Visual K and this online world. And I've even been to Tokyo twice. I've gone to
oh,
like Visual K shows in Tokyo and like all of this stuff. And it's like, I feel like so much has been unlocked for me because of my special interests, not to mention the writing, right? My first
mm,
novel that I wrote in the ninth grade that we will never see the light of day, it was based off a visual kei music video. So like I just can never thank my special interests enough for all that they have given me.
Oh, that's really lovely. And also, sorry, just going back to the fact that you've been to Tokyo, it looks like sensory hell. Can you explain how
That's
you
so
found
interesting.
Tokyo?
Oh my goodness. So I guess it depends on your sensory sensitivities.
Mm-hmm.
But as someone who lives in New York City,
True, you are accustomed to.
it's really rough for me in New York City though. But Tokyo is actually very quiet.
Really?
I don't think people realize, like, compared to major cities, from my perspective, I could be on a street with crowds of people in Tokyo, and it
Mm.
is significantly quieter than like even like half
Oh.
that crowd in New York City.
Mm-hmm.
So for me, it was kind of a reprieve. It's not the same as being out in nature, of course not,
Yeah.
but I think that audio sensory wise, Tokyo felt very comfortable for me compared to other cities.
Okay. That's so interesting because you kind of, I don't know, having seen like documentaries and things, it just looks so busy and stuff. But yeah, I guess the audio side, they don't really ever kind of explore that much. But it seems like a very kind of like clean and tidy place as well in terms of like, I feel like for example, London is not that. It is not clean or tidy. um, okay, that is interesting though. I really like. I don't know if you're into this as well. Like the like walk along videos that they do. Like there's
Mm.
I think his name's Ram Black on YouTube, and they do like 4K like walk along videos in different like um, kind of Tokyo streets and things and different yeah like tourist
A lot
attractions.
a lot of those videos, yeah, are in like Shibuya, Shinjuku, Akihabara, like very
Yeah,
highly populated areas and at like on like a Saturday. So like, if you're
yeah.
visiting Tokyo and you're like going around on a Monday during the workday, be pretty quiet.
That's the time to do it. Also,
Mhm.
do you like know like some Japanese as well?
I've been listening to Japanese music since I was 13, so
That would
I've
be it.
learned how
Yeah.
to pronounce a lot of Japanese words. I have
Yeah.
beginner level Japanese. I study it regularly, but it's a very big language.
Yeah, like I can imagine like cuz it's a lot of like it's quite visual, isn't it, in terms of like symbols and things, I think.
Yeah, the writing with
Yeah.
kanji. Yeah.
Honestly, fascinating. I wish I could I wish I could learn, but I remember being like 14 or 15 and both my French and German teachers were like, please, Emily, don't do a language at exam level. And I was like, okay, there's
Oh
nicer ways of
my.
saying it. They were like, please don't do a language. I was like, oh, okay. So that tells you enough. Right, I have almost been speaking to you for an hour and a half. I'm so sorry. Was there anything else? Like we haven't chatted about Tifa and Farron, so I don't know if you want to quickly do that before we kind of wrap up and say where people can follow you.
My lovely pets, Tifa and Farron. Tifa is my cat, Farron is my dog, and to any fellow gamer geeks out there, yes, Tifa is named after Tifa from Final Fantasy VII, and Farron is named after Lightning Farron from Final Fantasy 13. So they're
Incredible.
my lovely animals.
And do they ever feature on stream? Just, you know.
Sometimes they show up, but I always
Yeah.
like to give them the choice to not be locked in my room for hours with me. But
Fair
sometimes
enough.
they choose, and sometimes they tell me, no, thank you, not today.
Yeah. They kind of know what you're up to and like, nah, I don't want to be on the stream. I'm okay.
Yeah.
That's so cute. Oh. And what breed is your dog?
So, Farron is actually Akita and Japanese Spitz mix, which was like not an intentional thing that I sought for, actually. I just found her from a rescue in a completely different state. And I actually wasn't going for Farron. I was going for a different dog at the rescue. And
Oh.
they were like, we actually think you'd be a really good fit for Farron because Farron had a lot of like early trauma as a pup. And I had experience with feral animals, and so they asked me to take Farron, and I did. And she's such a big bright spot in my life. And Tifa is a classic black cat.
Just classic, straightforward. Oh, that's so cute. Well, thank you so much for spending an hour and a half of your time with me. It's honestly been really, really interesting to hear just how much you're doing. Like, you should be so proud, because I don't know how you're juggling all of these things, and the fact that you've written 3 books and you're about to hopefully, write some more. That's really, really exciting. And I will pop a link below in the show notes so that people can find your books. But would you like to tell us where we can find you online?
Definitely. So my username is Autienelle, AUTIENELLE, and that's on Instagram and Twitch, where I'm most active. So come check me out on Sundays on Twitch. We body double, we hang out, and I do some surprise streams throughout the week. And my website, you can find me at laurenmelissaellzey.com.
Amazing. And your books, you have like a page on your books there as well, don't you?
Yes.
Amazing. I will link that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you. This was wonderful.